The active RAL service is a RESTful web service and can be invoked over any HTTP client. To invoke the generate web forms function, a developer will need to send an RDF ontology file to the endpoint of an active RAL service. For demo purposes, we have developed a web page that allows us to send an RDF file over the browser to our deployed active RAL service. We can post the SSN ontology into the text field and submit the content to the active RAL service by clicking on an extract class. In the background, an HTTP post with the SSN ontology as a payload is sent to the active RAL service endpoint. The active RAL generate web forms function generates a RAL form model based on the input ontology according to the algorithm described in our paper. After creating the web form model and persisting it in the background, in the triple store, the active RAL service returns the UI to the newly generated RAL form model. For the purpose of this demo, we submit a new HTTP GET request with the previously returned UI, which is done in the JavaScript, and display the resulting HTML plus RDFA annotations created by the active RAL service in the tab XHTML plus RDFA. Because the SSN ontology is fairly large, it has 39 classes, the RAL JavaScript library in the frontend doesn't display the entire RAL web form, but it splits the web form based on its classes. It displays a list box where the user can select which class instance she wants to create. For this demo, we want to create an instance of the survival range class. The resulting web form includes an update form field where the user can retrieve existing instances of the selected class for pre-filling the form. If we click on the update button, a pop-up window appears where a user can either search in a local active RAL service repository, or she can reference an external linked data graph with its EUI. We do not have any data in our local repository here on the machine, but active RAL can also look up linked data on the web with the Synergy API. We can type in the survival range in the text search box and get a result set of survival ranges indexed in Synergy. Unfortunately, there are not many SSN ontology instances available externally in Synergy, so we will need to create the survival range instances ourselves. Otherwise, the RAL JavaScript library would retrieve the data from this referenced UI and pre-fill the form fields with the object values of matching object relations in the reference graph. The survival range class in SSN doesn't have any data type properties, and as such we do not have any form controls for data type properties. In fact, the SSN ontology doesn't include any data type properties, but just object properties. But we have two distinct types of form controls for object properties, one for single-length property chains and one for multi-length property chains. The has survival range and is property of property are single-length property chains, meaning that the range class has no further properties, whereas the in-condition object property is a multi-length property chain, where the range class condition has exactly one object property is property of. For single chain properties, the user can either pre-fill the text box with relation values from an existing survival range instance by clicking on add existing, or can create a new object relation by clicking on new. When clicking on new, the text box becomes active and the user can either type in a UI or just some plain text, which will be prefixed with a UI. When clicking on Add Existing, an HTTP request is issued with the UI of the selected property range. In this case, the range of the has survival property. And the service returns a ranked list of survival properties, which are again displayed in a separate pop-up window. The user can select a class instance which results in a pre-fill of the has survival property text box. For multi-length property chains, the user can either pre-fill the field of the object property, in this case is property of, with an existing class instance, in this case feature of interest, in a similar way as was done before with the single chain properties. Or the user can click on the condition class hyperlink to transparently create a new class instance of type condition with a new is property of relation by typing in a UI, or again a label as with the previous text box, which will be prefixed with a UI. An additional feature of the web form in a RAL model is the possibility to add multiple relations of the same class instance in accordance with the open world assumption, which we can do with the plus button. And this can only be done if the survival range class is non-functional. We can also collapse it and as such delete the previously added non-functional relations by clicking on the minus button. When the user finished filling in the form field, she can click on Submit. The Raoul JavaScript library will parse the DOM tree, create an RDF graph and update the RDF graph with the user input, and submits the RDF payload to the Active Raoul service. The Active Raoul service returns a UI to the newly created RDF graph, which is also persisted in the repository. For demo purposes, we also have included a button on the web form that can be used to retrieve the input data of the submitted web form as RDF. In our case, it is the instance of the survival range class, and we can click on the Get Raoul RDF button to get the instance of the survival range class which we just created.